Hey, it's me, MLB. Here is part 4 of heavy training. Enjoy. But just before you stepped back out of your room, her little voice stopped you. Is that it? She suddenly asked in a soft voice, pointing to a blanket of yours that was haphazardly thrown over the armchair near your bed. Is what it? Oh yes, my blanket. See? You said, walking in and over to it and then plopping her down on your bed so you could pick up your blanket to show her. You reached for it and grabbed each corner so you could show her that it was indeed a bigger version of her one, and she imitated you, holding her little blanket up to see the size difference. Mummy and baby, you said joyfully as you looked around one side of your blanket to her sitting on the bed. She nodded, with a much more relaxed look on her face, but still no smile. You put your blanket down on the chair and turned to her to get her to follow you out, but to your surprise and delight, she quickly switched the blanket to one hand and then outstretched both hands to you, non-verbally asking to be picked up again. Naturally, you were only too glad to pick her up again, so you hoisted her up onto your hip and then said something about needing food and walked out of the room and back down the hall. She snuggled into you a little more as you walked that time, and you smiled to yourself. Okay, might not be too bad, you thought as you entered your kitchen. It was all good and well to take her to the kitchen and say that you wanted food, but what did you feed a small child? You didn't even know what she liked. Would she eat adult food? You hummed, standing there for a second not knowing what to do. Did you want something to eat? You must be hungry, right? You asked the little koala clinging to your side. She looked around a little, shyly, and then looked up into your face with her beautiful timid eyes. Hungry? You asked her again. She nodded, her little hand gripping onto your shirt a little more. Okay, let me see here. What do I have? You said as you walked over to the cupboard and pulled it open. Thankfully, you were a one-stop shop for food and snacks. You had anything and everything, well, that you liked to eat. You weren't sure if it was to anyone else's preferences, but you didn't care about them. You were only stocking food for yourself anyway. Is there anything that you like here? You asked as you placed your hand back around your middle to grab onto your other hand holding under her. She looked around a bit and you waited to see if there was anything she would like. It took forever, and then finally she shook her head sadly and looked at you. I don't know what any of these taste like, she said a little sadly. Has she been kept away from the world? How does she not know what any of these snacks taste like? You thought, as you looked from her back to your well-stocked food cupboard. Well, do you want to try something from here? Do you like salty food or sweet food? You asked. Apples, she said softly. Sorry? You asked, as you hadn't heard her since you grabbed onto a chip packet and scrunched it right when she spoke. I like apples, she said again. Oh, you do? Wait, I have some in the fridge, you said happily. They taste really good cold. Have you tried one from the fridge? All of your excitement at having found something that she liked was spilling forth now. She shook her head as you sidestepped to the fridge and opened the door. There, on the bottom shelf, were 5 red apples, sitting in the fruit tray. Here, you said excitedly, reaching a hand in to get one for her. Do you like it chopped? You asked, letting the fridge door close and stepping away. She looked unsure, so you set her down on the ground and pulled a chopping board and knife from the drawer and proceeded to chop the apple into slices for her. It's yummy this way, you said excitedly, as you reached up and got a plate from the shelf overhead and put the slices of apple on the plate. Actually, I'm going to have an apple too. Is that okay? You asked her. She nodded her little head vigorously, with a little lightness in her eyes, and you turned and opened the fridge to get a second apple for yourself. In no time, you were walking in single file to the lounge room with sliced apples on a plate, and you glanced back over your shoulder to see if she was following you. She was, with both little hands holding the plate and the blanket slung over her shoulder, the tail end of it dragging on the ground behind her. Her eyes were on you, keenly watching where you were going so that she could follow you, and your heart squeezed. Oh, she's so cute, you screamed internally, looking ahead of you again and heading into the lounge room to sit down on the sofa. You okay? You asked her as you sat down on the seat, and she stood there for a second. Here, I'll hold your plate so you can get up. She handed her plate to you once you had set your plate down beside you, on the side that she wasn't going to sit on, and you took her plate and watched as she literally had to climb up the side of your lounge to sit down. Okay, you're good now? You asked as she sat down beside you and placed her hands in her lap. She looked at you and nodded, and you passed her plate back to her so she could start eating. You waited for her to take a bite and then took a bite of your own sliced apple and nodded to her. Good? You asked through a mouthful. She nodded as she chewed and wiggled her little feet a tad. "Aw, happy foot wiggles," you thought internally. Just then there was a bang from outside the house, and it didn't even register to you, but it certainly registered to her, and she jumped violently and tipped the apples off her plate as she dove into your lap and landed on your plate. Oops! Oh, hey, you okay? What's wrong?" you asked as apple pieces went flying everywhere. I'm sorry, she cried, trembling in your arms. It's okay. What happened?" you asked gently, holding her close. There was a noise, and... She was trembling so hard it broke your heart. "It's all right," you said gently. "Hey, I'll send a message to Aizawa and get him to check outside the house, okay? He's out there. He'll make sure nothing bad has happened, okay?" Her shaking subsided a little, and she looked up at you and nodded her head, so you pulled your phone out of your pocket and opened messages to him. "Hey, Eri heard a sound outside the house and she's worried it's something bad. It's probably nothing, but if you're around the area, could you do a sweep around the house to make sure it's all good?" you sent to him. "There, I sent him a message," you said to her with a smile. "He'll check to make sure it's all safe around the house." Okay, she said softly, sitting up a little. "I'm sorry, I spilled all the apples." "That's the least of my worries," you said with a soft smile. "As long as you're okay, then that's all that matters to me." This is for all of those that wanted to cuddle Eri. Stay tuned for the next chapter, not chapter, it's part 5 coming next week. I'll see you then.